Hello everyone, my name is Ymedia. I'm the group editor at Ymedia, and today is a very historic day. Yes, Canada and US. We've been partners, we've been allies, we've fought war together, and here we are today. US announces they're putting 25% tariffs on Canada. Canada also announces we're going to put 25% dollar-to-dollar tariffs on US. The gloves are off. The trade war between Canada and US has started. Where will this end? We do not know who will be the beneficiary. I doubt anybody is going to benefit out of that. Losers are clearly both US and Canadian consumers. There will be job losses on both sides of the border. Definitely there will be loss in trade, in business, and so many other things. Why did this happen? How did we get to this point? We'll definitely talk about that. But more importantly, what happens next? Ymedia Newsroom. Welcome to Channel Y. Welcome to Y+. Welcome to Radio Y. On behalf of Ymedia, a very, very special coverage on this historic day. Group editor Ymedia leading the coverage for you. And I also have our very special co-host who's been hosting many political shows, business shows, food for thought, and Ymedia very recently. Monaji, a very warm welcome on Ymedia. How are you?
I'm doing well. This has been a big day in terms of what has been announced on both sides of the border from the United States to here in Canada, and I'm looking forward to getting into this topic with you on specifics.
Sure, we'll talk specifics, but those who have just tuned in, I'd like to tell you once again, for quite some time, US President Donald Trump, he was saying that yes, he's going to put tariffs on Canada, Mexico, and China. 25% on Canada, 25% on Mexico, and 10% on China. And yes, he did exactly that. From Tuesday, 4th of February, 25% tariffs will be put on all imports, excluding the energy imports from the US side. So anything that Canada will be exporting to US, they'll be facing 25% tariffs. The energy exports from Canada will be facing 10% tariffs. Canada did the same. $37 billion imports that we are going to bring from US, so they'll be put to 25% tariffs, and then another billions of dollar tariff coming later stage, so that the Canadian importers can adjust to that. But a blanket 25% tariff on American goods, bringing on, I think both the sides now they've announced that. There are a host of questions that we'll be discussing. In the press conference that Prime Minister Trudeau announced, he did mention that yes, Canadians have fought wars with US. We've stood alongside them as recently as the Afghan war. It was the Canadian soldiers who went with the US soldiers in the Afghan war. And Canada and US have been partners in trade for many years. NAFTA was signed in 1994, but even much before that, we had an amazing relationship, trade relationship, economic relationship, people-to-people connection, and of course the military relationship as well. And we're both part of the G7 countries. We're both part of the G20 nations. Canada is part of the NATO alliance, which US, by the way, is a very strong partner in that. We'll talk about that. We are partnering in so many other ways, whether it comes to UN, relief efforts, wherever there is a disaster, and here we are today. And we've reached a point, if I may start, the day when the tariffs are announced, the day when the gloves are off, the day when the trade war begins, US President Donald Trump is not even responding to Prime Minister Trudeau's phone calls. He's not talking to him. We've heard that when President Trump, he was elected as a president, he spoke to Chinese President Xi Jinping directly, even sent him a personal invite. We know he's spoken to so many other leaders. We know the US President, so many issues. We know that they're also trying to facilitate meetings between Chinese President Xi Jinping and US President Donald Trump. Also, there have been talks of meetings between Modi and Trump. But here we are, Canada. What will be the impact? We've already listened to so many businesses. They are facing the heat because of inflation and so many other issues. And here we are, the high interest rates, the inflation, consumer confidence, real estate market has been very challenging. So, Ramonaji, your take on all this, where does this leave us?
We've heard about this tariffs before the election of President Trump on November 5th, and it was a big conversation on election night when we saw the numbers come in and him being the clear winner, and it was a big conversation about what would happen now. Was he serious about the tariffs? And in the 2 months since he's won, this has been the massive conversation in terms of, is this going to happen? And even since he has been inaugurated on January 20th, we've heard about it every day. And even so, we still, I think, there was always a hope in the back of our hearts and minds that it's not going to happen. When we heard, okay, it's because of illegal border crossings, it's because of fentanyl, then there was the massive response by the federal government with the $1.3 billion investment just announced a few days ago. And even then, we still hoped, maybe February 1st will come and, nothing will happen. Maybe he'll change his mind. And there was that slight hope, even when we sent, our ministers there, Foreign Affairs Minister and the rest of them there, hoping that perhaps the message can be relayed. Marco Rubio, Secretary of State, was put in place, and we thought, okay, at least there is one cabinet member that we can talk to, and then perhaps he could reach the president and make a case for Canada. And until the last moments, until this morning, I think, waking up anxiously and trying to see, what is DC announcing, what is President Trump announcing from his executive orders, and here now we have it. It's, it is definitely firm. It is the 25%. It goes into effect on Tuesday, February 4th, and we just heard Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, and we've heard him for the last few days saying that Canada's preparing a retaliatory tariff, and yes, he announced the 25% against the U.S. goods being imported into Canada. He announced it'll be $155 billion, $30 billion starting as of Tuesday, February 4th, and another $125 billion starting from 21 days after, which would be February 24th. And this would essentially mean that, February 25th, this would essentially, he said it's because the 21-day period, the 3-week period is so Canadian businesses can find other partners when it comes to importing. Now, I would love to see what this list looks like, because, when I go to a store, when I go to, for example, Shoppers Drug Mart, majority of the brands I look at are American. When I go to, for example, a retailer to purchase clothes, most of the brands I'm looking at are American. So I would like to know myself, as when it comes to goods, and you go to the grocery store, and I know we talk about Florida oranges and some of those things, what other items are from the United States, and what does that look like? And also, is this now an opportunity for Canada to do more trade with Mexico directly, right? Because Mexico, it has its produce as well, and there's the trade agreement between Canada and Mexico. So I'd like to see where, I'd like to hear more about that from our leaders, where that stands. When it comes to produce, especially in these winter months here in Canada, it's a different story. When it comes to summer months in Canada, we of course have our own agriculture that we can use. But this difference between made in Canada and produced in Canada, that's also important. And it just reminded me of back in COVID time when when we went to the store, there was that thing where the stores blocked off all the items that, what were they called, not necessary items versus necessary items. Remember, there was a terminology we used during COVID about essential, yes, essential and non-essential.
Not essential, non-essential.
Exactly, and then we had the stores put the essential items in the front, and there was a time where we couldn't even buy non-essential items. Just imagine, that was a few years ago, and we all went along with it. So I would imagine if the stores would put Canadian products in a place where we can see it, so we're not picking up everything and looking to see where is it made. Obviously, we're going to see the prices are going to be different, right? Of course, if you're in a store, let's say you're in a grocery store, and as you're walking through the produce aisle, you're going to see price differences everywhere now. So I think that might be a good indication of it. But I'm just wondering, with biggest border, we have 1,200 entry points between U.S. and Canada. We've beefed up the security levels. We're talking about 400,000 people cross the border every day. We're talking about $3.6 billion worth of goods that cross the border every day. These are big numbers, staggering numbers. We're looking at 1.2 million Canadian jobs that are directly connected to exports, Canadian exports into the United States. We're looking at the same number, almost 4 American jobs that are directly connected to imports into Canada. So the way I'm looking at it is that if we're going into a situation where, depending how long this goes, recession is looming, and now we also have all these items that are not Canadian, for example, that come from the United States, are going to have the tariffs on it. So I'd love to understand, this $155 billion worth of imports, what that also means. I didn't get a clear answer from the Prime Minister once when he was asked about, Parliament's prorogued until March 24th, when a reporter asked him, is Parliament going to go back now just so they could pass these measures, aid for potential Canadians, not just the ones that are losing their jobs and the industries that are going to be hard hit, but also the fact that now an affordability crisis is going to go to a new level of this 25% increase in tariffs. It's just tax, essentially. And I didn't get a good answer about that, so I don't know what that means. Does that mean Canadians don't have a relief package until after Parliament resumes on March 24th? And also, what does it mean for Ontario? We're in an election until February 27th. So it leaves a lot of things unknown, essentially, and what that means. So I'd like to understand some of those things in a lot more detail. And does that mean, do you remember like during COVID, the frenzy of buying toilet paper and everything else, essential items? Is there now going to be a frenzy until Tuesday, February 4th, where we can buy these American goods? Because, everything I look at is American items. Look at all the brands you consume, look at the things you purchase. I'm just really trying to understand what that is. I know that recently, this whole Buy Canada item is important. So I just want to point out a distinction about the difference between what's the difference between product of Canada and made in Canada. There is a little bit of a distinction here. Turns out that a product of Canada is claiming that about its Canadian content, 98% is Canadian content. So that's why when you see product of Canada, whereas when it says made in Canada, the claim comes because it's a 51% threshold for Canadian content in terms of, so there's that difference. So product of Canada versus made in Canada. And, this is a study we need to do, and this is something as consumers we have to learn very fast what that is.
Yeah, made in Canada, you could bring parts from other places and assemble it here. So as long as it's more than 51%, so then you can still call it made in Canada. So product of Canada, mostly it's referred to something like produce, which is 99% or 100%. That is there, so that is definitely, a product of Canada. Like I guess both of us are made in Canada. We've born elsewhere outside Canada.
Yeah.
But more than 50% if you've been here in our lives. But I want to ask you a serious question. Prime Minister Trudeau was asked during the press conference, U.S. Chamber of Commerce, or there are others who are saying Canada is no more an ally of the U.S. That's a big statement. He didn't get into that rhetoric. He just sidestepped the question. He said, we're still friends. Obviously that was a very diplomatic answer. But I think why this question came out in the press conference because of two other questions. He was also asked in the press conference that on this important day, when both the countries are imposing 25% tariffs, President Trump is not even picking your phone. And the other question was, if he's not picking up your phone today, what can we expect with the relationship moving forward? And I also want to add on quickly, which we were talking earlier as well, U.S. Press Secretary, she clearly mentioned, Caroline Levitt, she clearly mentioned when she was asked about the tariffs being imposed at the press conference, so she said, instead of making remarks in the media, Prime Minister Trudeau should pick up a phone and call Donald Trump. So, and I have the schedule of Donald Trump, whatever he's doing today. He was at his resort. He went to his golf club, which is 15 minutes away. He comes back. So it was not, obviously it was a busy day for him, but still, Trudeau, and as his prime minister, Trudeau would expect that he would pick up his phone for 2, 3, 5 minutes, even if he denies that, yes, Mr. Prime Minister, sorry, we cannot, discuss it now, maybe tomorrow or the after, but not even responding to any call. He's not even talking, and then all these things. Please.
Well, I think when it comes to President Trump, he has been very unpredictable in doing things in an innovative way, which has never been done before. He's even done politics in a different way. He's essentially, it's not the Republican Party, it's the Donald Trump Party. The way he likes to have his mass events where, hundreds and thousands of people go to those events. The way he likes to talk and connect directly to the voter, his messaging, he's a storyteller. He doesn't, he's not heavy on policy, he's more on stories. So, he's definitely done things very differently. But one thing we've seen consistent about him in this administration, in his second term, is that he says he's going to do something and he's quickly following through it. There doesn't seem to be much of a wait time from when he says he's going to do it to the point of, him actually doing it. So this was now, if he's showing the world, hey, I say what I mean what I say. Right? I'm not kidding. This is my agenda. This is why the people have elected me, and this is what I'm going to do. Even if, for the history of Canada and the United States, we've been allies. Now, I don't think because of Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and President Trump, Canada and U.S. don't have a relation, because it's really the people. Right? It's our history. It's the people. We have more probably friends and family south of the border and them north of the border. So it's not, and that's one thing I want to really identify, is that I know our quality of life, and as human beings, when we reflect on how did I really live? Did I enjoy my life in a sense of like, what were the rights I was granted? It really comes down to the leader of the country where you reside and where you have your citizenship. Definitely, it definitely comes down to that. And so I think that, our long history that we have between the two countries doesn't just get abolished or removed or erased or goes in a sour note just because of a president who's going to be there for one term, 4 years, and just because of a prime minister who's outgoing in 5 weeks. I think also another factor that had to do with it is, President Trump, the way he is, maybe he just thought, I want to speak to a decision maker. And right now, unfortunately, Canada doesn't have a decision maker. Yes, we have a prime minister, but whatever he announced today, he will not have to deal with it come 6 weeks from now. 6 weeks from now, he could be anywhere else in the world, and because he's no longer held, under any sort of circumstances, because he's resigned as prime minister until there's a new leader who becomes prime minister. So, President Trump is like, okay, well, if someone's going to call me, I want to talk. When you go to a store or you deal with some service or a product and it's not up to satisfactory, and you say, can I speak to your manager? And then, or in a situation, can I speak to the owner? You always want to escalate it to the decision maker, because usually, the person that you're dealing with is frontline. Perhaps they're not the decision maker, so therefore maybe they can't solve your problem. This is a big problem we're having with the United States and Canada, and perhaps President Trump is not picking up the phone call or taking a call from someone he believes is no longer the decision maker. Now, that decision maker will be there by March 9th, when there's an election, a Liberal leadership election, but, they won't be. It's again, it's a very tough situation. Now, on the same note, when a Premier or PC leader, Doug Ford, says, I'm going to go to DC twice in this election period, well, Trump is not going to meet you. Trump is meeting with heads of state. He's not meeting with premiers of provinces, right? He's not. So I don't know what he's going to go do there in the middle of an election at the same time when he's not taking a call of an outgoing prime minister. This is a telling time that, Canada needs its leadership. It needs to have a plan, a strategy, and one that we can know. So today, from the press conference that we just heard from outgoing Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is, yes, these tariffs are in place, $155 billion worth, $30 billion starting as of Tuesday, February 4th, another $125 billion as of 21 days afterwards. But do we know what the list is? We don't know what the list is. Do we know what the measures of sort of support for these industries? We don't know. We do know that when it comes to energy and it comes to critical minerals, they're going to be off the table, because really, if we remove that too, then we're in a very bad situation. We are in an interconnected economy. It's the way it is.
Yeah, and I think on both the sides there'll be a lot of challenges. First things first, I think the businesses. As we speak, there are many businesses who are already thinking of stalling any sort of investment. That's going to be one of the big factors, because in every country wants to attract investment, especially for Canada. Imagine any business in Canada right now. Obviously, I doubt not many, unless you're very bullish, you won't be investing anymore. And this is time to be more of, I would say, dovish than bullish, because most of the businesses would think twice before investing anything. So new investment could almost be stalled at this time, first things first. And we were talking here building pipelines, we're talking here building refineries, or any new major infrastructure from the private sector, any new capital investment from the private sector, that will be challenging. That's first thing. Secondly, when Trump has already announced 25% tariffs, we were already competing with Mexico, even US for that matter, or other countries when it comes to bringing in more auto plants here. By the way, just one automaker, if they plan an assembly plant, it's almost $5 to $7 billion worth of economic activity every year, and there are thousands of jobs created. So now here we are. I mean, everyone at the global stage, because this was announced even at the World Economic Forum in Davos as well. So everyone knows that we are in the firing range of Donald Trump right now. And it's not just the fentanyl, it's not just the drugs, because as Prime Minister Trudeau said this in his press conference, less than 1% of the illegal drugs are from Canada that are moving to US. Less than 1% of illegal immigrants. So it's not about illegal immigrants, I think so. It's not even just about the drugs. Obviously, it's about, I think it's also about the personal relationship. That was asked in the press conference today. The personal relationship between the two leaders hasn't been so good. You mentioned that earlier in the program, in the first term and in the second term also. I see that. You want to say something? Go ahead.
No.
Yeah, and I think moving forward, I don't think so things are going to ease anytime soon. As much as you're right, Trump is going to wait for 9th of March, but then you have a new leader, new prime minister, Mark Carney or Chrystia Freeland. Both of them have been very aggressive, rightfully or wrongfully. That's for the Canadians to decide. But both of them, I'll start with Mark Carney. I mean, he's already used the word bully for Trump, and he says he's ready. He's not going to back down. Canadians are not going to take this easily. Listen to his interviews. I spoke with Chrystia Freeland, and we're going to play the interview again. She clearly mentioned it's going to be dollar to dollar. And I've heard many premiers also say the same things. Look what Doug Ford is saying. I've heard other premiers also saying appeasement policy will not work. No, that will not work. So I think almost every single premier, other than Danielle Smith, she did mention that there was not good on Donald Trump. But then she said our diplomacy has worked, because instead of 25% tariffs, she's got some sort of concession that's 10% tariffs on the energy export. And in the press conference when Trudeau, he's been asked this earlier as well, are we planning to ban oil exports? Because that could really hurt. The US refineries are really dependent on crude oil from Canada, and that's one of the largest exports, almost $120 to $130 billion. But Prime Minister Trudeau, he didn't mention that. He did mention there are so many other things. And I heard Mark Carney also. Mark Carney also said the same thing. Similar to that, Trudeau is also mentioning that there are so many others that we could take. Mark Carney also said we don't go there. So yes, there are so many. This could be that, yes, they could be talking banning Tesla. I mean, if today Prime Minister Trudeau is saying that the US products could be off the shelves I mean, if we are hearing today, buy Canada as much as from the Prime Minister, if we are hearing from the premiers, buy Canadian products or Canadian produce, as you were mentioning, as much as you can. So, how are we going to stop Tesla? That will be definitely on cards. So I think this could escalate, and there are no winners here. I think I'm hoping that's all we can do. And I know it's not a slogan anymore. Hope is not a plan, but the plan should have been put in place much earlier than today, or even 6 months or 1 year ago, when we thought, okay, we could have Trump as another term. That plan at that time was missing.
I think, but people were hoping until this morning that it wasn't going to happen. They thought, oh, never between Canada and U.S. No, how could it? How could it possibly, right? Because we, and since the trade agreements, we didn't think that this could be something that would come undone so fast. And think about it, like, the G7 countries, imagine the leaders are now mad at each other. To a degree, not mad at each other, but usually you saw the leaders of the G7 countries as like the custodian of what they appeared to be civilization, right? That we're going to gather together and make key decisions for democracy and the things we all stand for. And now there's that sort of situation. But I think no matter who's in office here or south of the border, I think the relationship between the two countries, when it comes to businesses working together, people, who as neighbors, I think that will stay. It's not these are leaders, and I think that's why this is a critical time for us to really clue into who we're electing. And of course, we elect a certain ideology, and then they get into office and they change, right? It seems like Donald Trump, whatever he said, he's doing, right? It seems like there's no change there. So I think on our side is that we're hoping that the people we elect, they stick to what they promised. And I think since Trump has now set a new precedent, he set a new bar in a type of politician that says something, if you like it, I'll do it. Even if it's the most unpopular thing in the international stage, even if it's the most unpopular thing, with our trading partners or with our allies, if the people who elected me want me, to do X, Y, Z, I'll do it. And I think that's a new level of type of politics that we're going to see now, where it's I'm not saying it's less diplomatic, but it's more, I was put here for a mandate, and I'm going to make sure I fulfill my mandate. Whatever those announcements are, whatever those commitments are, from day one it gets done. Because as you can see, he's really created the way these politicians here in Canada are just like, unraveling and running into elections and stepping down and stepping up and doing all kinds of cartwheels. It's because a new benchmark has now been put in place for politics, a politician, a leader of the free world, of a nation, and I think that's what now we're going to expect in our leaders, right? Really hold them accountable to it.
Yeah, and as much as I heard Prime Minister Trudeau saying that yes, Canadians are very anxious right now. But I think so are people across the globe. I mean, anyone who's watching the news these days, yes, there's uncertainty. I mean, it's not only because of Trump. I mean, he would have added to the uncertainty which is already existing. China and India, as much as they're trying to, iron out the issues, but there's still a lot of mistrust between these two major powers. What are the other two major powers? US and Russia, they're already fighting proxy war in Ukraine. So Russia and US, they don't see eye to eye. China and US, they're the two superpowers definitely fighting for the top spot. And we all know China could be definitely the first country on this planet to reach an economy of, or GDP of $50 trillion. So US is also racing towards that side. Then they have tech war going on. Then they have the economic war going on. The trade war could escalate. So there's uncertainty between those two. Here comes India. India and China, the mistrust is still there. India and US, as much as, there's a lot of issues that both of them want to solve together, but then there are a lot of issues where there is divergence. Talk about H-1B visas. talk about so many other issues. So the four major powers, I'm not taking Europe into context for a minute. Four major powers here do not really trust each other. None of them trust each other. And then you bring in the European Union. Now let's talk about Europe. Where is England right now? One prime minister after another, they couldn't really shore up their economy. Then Germany is facing its own struggles. The leading economy of Europe, Germany, and there are so many other host of other issues. Leave it for some other day. And then there is France, so much of turbulence there as well. Then there is Spain, Greece, and so many other have had so many economic meltdowns. And then where does Middle East stand between all that? They're already looking to the future because when their oil reserves don't serve any purpose, so how do they build their sustainable economies? And there are so many other countries from Iran to Afghanistan to Pakistan to Bangladesh to Myanmar. There's a lot of political instability there. So, and Japan is facing its own set of challenges. So there's already so much of uncertainty across the globe. And there we have Trump at the helm of affairs, bringing more uncertainty for almost everyone. But I think if there could be some possible winners, or if not possible winners, who could get away unscathed, I think India is definitely one of them. I see that. Then maybe Australia, Japan, maybe South Korea as well. Who knows? But I think, almost every other country, definitely there will be challenges from England to Germany. Elon Musk has been making comments there as well. Canada is already facing what it is right now. Mexico as well, and there are so many other countries in South America as well. From Colombian president, we saw that, to Brazil, to Venezuela, when you're going to deport so many people there.
Yeah, and so I'm wondering if, since in Ontario the auto sector is now definitely in a very bad situation, does that now make vehicles more expensive? It probably will. Do you remember during COVID, because they were behind in new vehicles, therefore now your old vehicle was a lot more expensive. It increased in value. That time it was like if you had a vehicle, which is when the car thefts were happening as well, because there was just no supply of new models. So now I would imagine, given that new vehicles are going to be so much more expensive, I guess there's going to be a lot more reliance on used vehicles. I'm just thinking, how is this all going to turn out in the coming weeks, in the coming months? Because we don't know how long this is going to go for. And I think, let's just say in a hypothetical scenario, let's just say by the end of February they all call it off. It doesn't mean it's going to go away. I think this is a rude wake-up call for Canada in terms of what have we been doing. If we lose our major number one customer, in terms of 75% of exports go to the United States, if we lose our number one customer, it's our biggest customer for crude oil. 60% of oil, American crude oil is from Canada. Now it's like, even if we get out of this, let's just say in a few weeks, and it goes away, I think we shouldn't forget this. I think this is one of those things where, how we remember Remembrance Day, we take a minute and a lot of lives were lost, and that's why we remember them on November 11th. I think today, what was announced, many livelihoods would be lost, right? Maybe not your life in terms of your life will be lost, but your hopes, your aspirations, your livelihood, your everything. Today we've talking about massive losses. We're talking about a lot of setbacks. We're talking about. So I think this is a moment that we should not forget. And if there is a leader that forgets this and doesn't have a plan for where Canada's going to go, obviously short-term plans is to be announced. The long-term plans are the investment in our infrastructure, in our industries when it comes to minerals and natural resources. What that looks like. If I don't hear this on any of their budget, because they have to get a budget approved. If it's not part of that, I think we need to have a repercussion here, some sort of a system where they can't forget what happened today. Because the lead up in this last 2 weeks, the lead up to today has been so, anxiety ridden, and then being here today and and not even understanding the big picture, because I'm just thinking, like, I go anywhere, we consume American products. That's all. Like, I mean, I don't know much Canadian stuff that, I mean, forget when it comes to entertainment, forget when it comes to music, forget when it comes to, you know, obviously from your iPhone to to your, you know, we use so much American goods. You know, so I would like even like Procter and Gamble. Like, I know there's a lot of manufacturing plants here, but those aren't Canadian companies. Johnson & Johnson's not a Canadian company. Just basic stuff like Dove, like, you use soap. Okay, that's not Canadian either. Like, so, you know, you know, whether you use Crest or Tide, or these are not Canadian companies. So what are the Canadian companies like, what do you use that's Canadian? Maybe there's, like, you know, I mean, I just recently purchased a Canadian brand of toothpaste that was very new, because I just thought, but besides that, we're so bombarded, like commercials we look at, every advertisement in any magazine and every billboard, you go to any mall, shopping mall, those are all, we've lost more Canadian brands from, like, Danier Leather. I mean, they left and they came back, from Le Chateau to, what were some of the Canadian stores? Suzy Cher, I think, it's still around. I'm just trying to think of all the Canadian stores that we've had that we've lost in the past little while. We lost, you know, the big box retailers came in, took out, Best Buy replaced, what was it? There was a Canadian brand before that Best Buy came and bought out. So I'm just thinking, like, you know, all those great Canadian businesses. I mean, we still have Shopify, that's Canadian. But, you know, just when you look at the list of Canadian businesses that closed down and that were acquired and gone, I mean, we still have Hudson's Bay. Is that still Canadian, or did that get purchased by the Americans?
I think that got purchased.
I think that got
Even Tim
purchased
Hortons
too.
got purchased.
But Tim Hortons used to be a Canadian company,
Canadian.
but then got bought up by Wendy's, you're right.
RBI restaurant branding.
Yeah. Oh, okay, there you go.
RBI brought...
So you know, and I'm just looking at, so that means, okay, so if it's not big brands, then it's your mom and pop shops, right? So please, like, when you go into a plaza, go to the non-brand store, you know, go into, you know, when it comes for food, it's a lot easier, but for other goods, right? Like, we had Grandin Toy. Do you remember Grandin Toy? That got replaced. That's gone. There's so many brands when we grew up that were actually Canadian. It was a Future Shop. It was called Future Shop. That used to be Canadian, and that's gone, and then got replaced by Best Buy. We don't have many options, right? BlackBerry, yeah. I mean, BlackBerry innovated too late. After the App Store, they didn't want to go into an App Store model. But I mean, they've revived in other areas. But yeah, maybe we buy a BlackBerry. You know, maybe. And I think this is definitely I think today, being February 1st, is another economic remembrance day that we really have to think about, and really, because, you know, this is President Trump, but it doesn't mean hasn't set a precedence for future presidents, right? And it doesn't mean that Canada should just be like, okay, we have one consumer, they're not going anywhere because they're tied to us by land. Like, obviously, that's not a thing anymore.
But here's another question as well. I mean, all these big social media companies, from Facebook to Twitter to Google to YouTube, all these big tech companies that we're seeing, I mean, all advertisement that's played on them, all billions of dollars are moving towards US, probably around 10 to $12 billion every year. 10 to $12 billion in terms of ad revenue is moving towards US companies because of this. But here we have our elected leaders talking about buy Canadian, Canada First today. But these leaders were advertising on Facebook, they were advertising on YouTube.
Well, that's something they should stop, right? Right now, for election time, that's what they're using. They should now come to Canadian media, right? From local, regional media to national media.
To Ymedia.
To Ymedia, yeah. And really, you know, exactly, you make an excellent point, right? By going into these other American companies, like, really put your money where your mouth is, right? And it's not even your money, it's really donations, it's the taxpayers. And I mean, obviously, when it's an election, it's from donations from, you know, the electoral.
Yeah, I mean, you're supporting if you're supporting the local media, you're not only supporting Canadian businesses, you're supporting Canadian workers, you're also supporting Canadian democracy, you're also supporting the fourth pillar of democracy, that is the media. Here we talk about supporting media, and when Facebook, they were talked into that, yes, why won't you support Canadian journalists? They said our Facebook is a platform, viral videos, it's not for news. So they've stopped all news. So you won't see any news on Insta, you won't see any news on Facebook. So, but they're still raking in billions and billions of dollars. Who is paying for all that? Who is paying for all that? We Canadians are paying for that. Many of our elected leaders are putting their ads on Facebook, Twitter. So we should be asking our elected leaders, why are you saying one thing and doing other? You're saying that yes, we should be buying Canadian, but you're putting your ads on social media platforms and making the US private companies richer and richer, who've sort of stifled the democratic process in different countries, not just US, but in different countries as well. So this is definitely a question. To your earlier point that you were making, there's a very stark contrast in what happened during the COVID. You're talking about the auto sector. You're right. There was issue about chip manufacturing, so many other issues that yes, the auto sector had challenges, and because of that, it wasn't easy to find new vehicles. Yeah, you're right. But at least at that time, the whole supply chain wasn't disrupted. My issue right now is, and what I'm really concerned right now, we could see a complete disruption in supply chain. That is the issue that I'm thinking, because you know what? Say for instance, I'm buying parts, and you said that in the previous program as well, and we've heard it many times. One part moves to US, then part comes back, and then so many other things. So the part is moving back and forth.
Yeah.
Say for instance, between Winsford and Detroit border. Both are auto hubs, Detroit being one of them, very massive auto hub, but then there are a lot of vendors across the border. And I've been in auto business, not actually, I wasn't doing a business. When I say I've been in auto business, I worked as a mechanical engineer. After doing my engineering, I've spent good 8 years as an engineer in the auto business. In India, there was only one company, that was us. You know how much market share in a massive country like India we had? We had 90% plus share. We used to manufacture rear axle shafts, and we used to manufacture so many other things. And as an engineer, I understand the system completely, and that system is applied here in North America as well, everywhere across the globe. What is the system? JIT, just in time. So as an engineer, when I used to go to the assembly plant, what I would see is like in minutes cars are coming out of an assembly plant. So I was dispatched where, say for instance, there are issues with the axles. They won't store that many axles. So all these parts come, they're assembled, stuck, moving out. In minutes, you'll see the cars, you'll see. So when I, as an engineer, I would go, I've seen all this, how it works. So here we are, say for instance, the tariffs start today. Now what's going to happen? So right now, I'm sure they've already done their calculations, but to source a different supplier, I'll even name the company like GNA. GNA, that's the company I worked for. And when we were manufacturing rear axle shafts, or we were, imagine if we are creating any auto product and suddenly that supplier cannot supply. It's very difficult because the parts arrive just in time. There's not massive storage. They bring the parts, there's limited storage there. You assemble all those plants and off you go. That's how an assembly plants are working. But if a trusted supplier from where you have been taking parts for years, and this is not just about auto, this is about so many other things. This will come out true, as you were mentioning about crude oil as well. You're right. I mean, US sources crude oil from other places as well. But for Canada, what is the major destination? It's 98% to US.
Yeah.
So if our crude oil stopped 100, it won't stop 100%, but if even it's 10%, 20% lesser, because 10% tariffs are coming in, I mean, somebody is going to pay. Yeah. Because as the tariffs come in place, now what will happen? You've bought gas from US, you bought gas from Canada. So when you're buying gas from US, the day tariffs come in place, so any oil that goes there, the importer of oil in US will have to start paying 10% extra. So if the car tank was filled for $70, right off the bat it's going to cost $77, 10% extra. So that $7 extra, where are they going to come from? So there are only three ways to see that. So you go to a gas pump, you are filling up your tank for $70. Now after this date, when when the 10% tariffs come, the oil importer has 10% extra cost, which he has to pay to the US government. It's not. So now what does he do? Does he pass on to the consumer that, okay, guys, you're filling up gas for $70 or $100, now it's going to be 10% extra. So it's not $100, it's 110. And we're not talking about anybody who's using gas for going to his office, work. Of course, they will be very much affected. But imagine all those transport companies who are using oil in bulk. Well, as an engineer, I've studied a lot on this. We'll talk some of that. Because the crude oil, when you refine it, what does come out? It's not just the oil or the gas that you're using. There's a diesel component to it, there is petrol to it, then there is gas. So if there is diesel being used, that'll also get expensive. If there is petrol, that is get expensive. There is oil, because after refining, they get all these components. So that's what crude oil gives you. So when you're using all these at a 10% higher rate because of the tariffs, so imagine that will be passed on somewhere. And if you're buying oil in bulk, imagine the kind of effect it could have on your business. So there's no option. And there are not so many, I don't think so the markups are so high. I mean, 25%. I mean, auto business is a cutthroat business. Almost all businesses in US and Canada, especially most of the buying these days, it's done on Amazon and Wayfair, so many other internet sites. So you're ordering something. Till yesterday, you were ordering that, say, for example, 98-inch TV. You order that, it would cost you around $7,000 or $8,000 right now. $7,000 or $8,000 TV, you order 25% extra. So imagine, do the math. Mm-hmm. It's going to if it's 8,000, it's going to cost you 10,000, 25% extra. So imagine the costs going up. And till yesterday, you were getting the same TV for $8,000, a 98-inch big screen TV. Today, it's going to cost you $10,000. Now, what is going to happen? And how many manufacturers do we have over here? How many manufacturers do we have over here? It's going to be very challenging for electronics, for furniture. So you've known the furniture business very well. How the supply chains are working in the furniture business.
Yeah, no, this, well, when it comes to furniture, all of the manufacturing is outside of the country. That's the other issue. When you now look at made in Canada or product of Canada, it's going to be a little bit more expensive than its competition of what's coming from China, right? Because obviously we have wage here that's, at a certain rate, and we have, those things that make things a little bit more expensive compared to other countries, right? When it's coming from China or elsewhere. So that's going to be another factor, that even when we now want to buy Canadian-made products, it's like also we feel is maybe a more premium rate product in comparison to another place. But I think the first it's going to hit, it's going to be produce. Think about when you go to a grocery store, think about all the things you're purchasing. Even if, aside from the fresh produce, the packaged produce, how many of those are American brands that are consumed? So this is going to
orange juice in particular.
Well, orange juice, but I mean, from cereal to chips, all those things. So, I mean, I think Canada has Lay's. I think that's Canadian,
yeah.
Right? So that's fairly good. But I mean, I think we're all going to learn very fast about what's Canadian, what's not Canadian.
Yeah.
Because I think we've just taken it for granted for so long, because everything that is in the United States is really here. I don't see it. I usually, between the two countries, most of my family's in the United States, I don't see what's there that's not here. And now this is going to be, something to grapple with. But I think today's the day not to forget. And, you're right. As Prime Minister Justin Trudeau said, that the people who lose here are the Canadians and the Americans, the consumers, really, who are just trying to work, trying to just get by. And this is the state of affairs. Now, mind you, U.S.'s situation got so far bad, which is why Donald Trump was elected, when it came to unaffordability, when it came to so many problems they have. I think now Canada's probably on the verge of this almost thing of saying, where aside from, we could look at President Trump and say, he's picked a war, but then we can also look at ourselves and say we didn't really do our job for ourselves.
Yeah.
It's like, when you get sick and the doctor tells you, unfortunately, you're sick with something, you can get upset about it, but then you really look at yourself and say, well, what was my lifestyle like? Did I really take care of my health? Was I eating well? Was I taking care of myself? Was I sleeping? Was I getting enough exercise or rest or whatever the case is, right? We really look at ourselves at the end of the day, no matter who we're mad at, and say, well, why didn't I do things when I had good physical health, right? Just like that quote we read about, good times and what it creates and hard times. We're in the hard times now, and hopefully this is a time where we're looking at ourselves and saying, I really don't, listen, this thing just crossed my mind. I dislike the concept of booze at grocery stores or corner stores. I apologize. I dislike the concept of the legalization of marijuana to coast, where you're seeing, vape stores, and then now we're going to have convenience stores with alcohol in it. Like, this is not the path forward for Canada. Like, this is just not, like we're not here in this day and age to talk about these sort of things as an election item, as a policy platform. It's not a good thing to expect from a majority government where that they could really pass anything they want. I know there's a lot of announcements, but really, I know there's like them saying, oh, it's going to increase revenues for grocery stores, or for convenience stores or corner stores. I mean, let's have a healthier Canada. We have multiple sclerosis rates are higher in Canada than anywhere else in the world. We really got to look at how Canadians can be more healthy, right? We got to look at how Canadians can prosper. I mean, majority of us are immigrants that came to Canada, not even first generation, and families left everything in home countries. Literally, you didn't pack your home and bring it with you. You didn't pack the items of your home. Leaving your roots. Leaving your home country, really, and everything that coming here, and starting from scratch. Whether you have to do some sort of certification to practice the same profession you did, or whether you have to go back to school, whether you have to take a lower level of job until you work your way up, learning a new language, learning a new culture, understanding the ways of this country, living with 5-6 months of winter, it's hard. And you come here for a better life, and perhaps, we don't have wars. Like, wars don't happen here. Today we are seeing an economic war, but you expect better. You expect a lot better when it comes to education system, your health care. You expect to have, opportunity to be able to work and not feel so restricted, and this unaffordability crisis. It's like this thing that's like weighing on your shoulders. And I think people who gave up almost everything they have to come to this country, to start a family, to really to be here and to become naturalized Canadians, they weren't expecting this state of affairs. I think this is also another thing that's people are gonna look back and say, is our quality of life better back in our home countries? And for many it is, because back in home countries it's a lot more affordable, right? If you were to sell your house here and sell your assets and you go back to your home country, is life going to be better? Possibly the weather is better. Possibly you have fresh, fruits and vegetables from most of the countries that are living here. Where you go back to your home countries, you're able to probably live a lot better and a way better standard of living if you were to just. So is the answer, let's leave Canada? Hopefully not, right? But I think this is something that people are looking at, saying, am I better off here or am I better off somewhere else? And this has been something that I've heard for a very long time. Even, I was talking to some of the students who've come here and who've been able to get residency here, and some of them say, we get discriminated against because of our skin color, and we have to learn everything from scratch. But at the end of it, life isn't that much easier, right? We've spent so much money to be here, and I'm living a lower quality of life here than I was back home, and maybe it's time to go back home, right? And then so what do you have? You have brain drain. They come, they study in Canada, and then they take and then they go back to their home country to be productive. We've seen that in healthcare for a long time. A lot of doctors study here, go to the States, go elsewhere, and practice. So, something's got to be done at this rate for where Canada is.
Yeah. I think we have a caller with us, and he wants to say something. If you're allowed, we can take a couple of calls.
Great.
Yeah. We have Mr. Ajmer Kalera online with us. Sir, you're on the air. You want to talk on the air?
ਹਾਂਜੀ ਸਤਿ ਸ਼੍ਰੀ ਅਕਾਲ ਜਦਵੀਰ ਜੀ
ਸਤਿ ਸ਼੍ਰੀ ਅਕਾਲ ਸਰ ਪਲੀਜ਼ ਗੋ ਅਹੈਡ
ਜੀ ਮੈਂ ਤੁਹਾਡੀ ਕਨਵਰਸੇਸ਼ਨ ਸੁਣ ਰਿਹਾ ਪਰ ਆਪਾਂ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਹਿਸਾਬ ਨਾਲ ਹੁਣ ਇਹ ਟ੍ਰੇਡ ਵਾਰ ਸਟਾਰਟ ਹੋਈ ਹੈ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਕੀ ਲੱਗਦਾ ਵੀ ਇਹ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਅੱਜ ਟਰੂਡੋ ਸਾਹਿਬ ਨੇ ਵੀ ਟੈਰਿਫ ਦਾ ਕਿਹਾ 150 ਬਿਲੀਅਨ ਤੇ ਸ਼ਾਇਦ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਆਪਣੇ 4 ਫਰਵਰੀ ਤੋਂ ਸਟਾਰਟ ਕੀਤਾ ਵਾ ਇਹਦਾ ਮਤਲਬ ਇੰਪੈਕਟ ਇਹਦਾ ਤਾਂ ਫਿਰ ਨੈਗੇਟਿਵ ਪਊਗਾ ਪਬਲਿਕ ਤੇ ਸਾਰਾ ਇੰਪੈਕਟ ਪਊਗਾ ਇਸ ਚੀਜ਼ ਦਾ ਤਾਂ ਆਪਣੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਕੈਨੇਡੀਅਨ ਪਬਲਿਕ ਨੂੰ ਸਾਰੇ ਗੁੱਡਸ ਆ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਉਹ ਐਕਸਪੈਂਸਿਵ ਮਿਲਣਗੇ ਇਸ ਹਿਸਾਬ ਨਾਲ ਤਾਂ
ਠੀਕ ਹੈ ਅਸੀਂ ਹੁਣੇ ਆਨਸਰ ਦਿੰਦੇ ਹਾਂ ਠੀਕ ਹੈ ਥੈਂਕ ਯੂ ਸਰ ਥੈਂਕ ਯੂ
Okay,
thank you. Just for our viewers' benefit, I'd like to tell you, Mr. Ajmer Kalera was asking that Canada has already announced that we are also going to impose 25% tariffs on US. So Ajmer Kalera had this concern that now that means our Canadian goods will be more expensive, or anything coming from US will be more expensive. Canadian goods for US consumers and US goods for the Canadian consumer. It's going to be more expensive. So yeah, that's a normal thing. That is actually that's the very purpose of putting on these tariffs. So the consumers would suffer on both sides of the border. And to your point that you were mentioning earlier, that and I like the way you're trying to stay positive and giving it a good positive spin. That yes, and I'm going to agree more on that one. That yes, we should be more well prepared. I can just quote in the interest of time 3 instances. When COVID happened, I was interviewing Prime Minister Trudeau. I asked him one very important question. I said, this is not the first time that we are in this situation. We had SARS earlier. There was lots of recommendations from after the SARS came out. Then we had Ebola, and now we have COVID. So this is not the first time we have a pandemic, and this won't be the last time. So now we have vaccines, everything seems fine, back on track. So what are we doing so that the next time, if at all, the pandemic, it could be, so we should be well prepared for that. From that point onwards now, how much more have we done? How much more? Are we having more personal protective equipments? Yes, I know for a fact that yes, there are more personal protective equipments being produced. But look at our healthcare system. It's crumbling. It's worse than even before. During 2020, we had challenges, but now here, fast forward that to 2025. How many more hospitals have we built? How many more healthcare professionals have we introduced into the system? How many more vaccines are we creating? So that itself is a challenge. Same thing I asked, when budget was announced, I had Minister Anita Anand. I said I was expecting almost $4 to $6 billion increase in the defense budget. Obviously, she won't go against her prime minister. So I asked Minister Anand, and she was very polite in answering, yes, this, we would have expected more. But the point being, we missed so many opportunities over the years of strengthening ourselves. And if I could sum up, if you allow me, and I want your response too, if I can sum up, I think first things first, we need to build a massive infrastructure right now as we speak. The relief package is fine, but imagine if we are coming out, we spent almost $80 billion of relief packages in the COVID. What did we build? Did we really build anything? Yes, it was important, but billions of dollars went to those people. I personally know many people who were not at all working. They were just sitting at home. They took the $2,000 paycheck. They were sitting at home already. They weren't doing anything. Then there were others I know. I'm not saying all of them. Most of them worked very, very hard during the COVID. But then there were others who chose to sit down home. Oh, I'm getting $2,000 sitting at home. Why would I go to work? Maybe you're getting $3,000, $3,500, or $4,000. I don't need to work. For $3,000, if I'm getting $2,000 sitting at home, there were many companies who took that $40,000 or $60,000. So even if you didn't need that, out of the $60,000, you took that money, you have 3-4 corporations, and you're paying back $40,000. So many issues. So I think now, of course, a very targeted approach is needed. That yes, we do provide relief, but more importantly, look at the bigger picture. What's going to happen next after all this trade war dies down? I think the bigger picture would be what China has done, what Japan has done. Look at what Japan, I mean, they were bombarded with a nuclear bomb. The only country on which the nuclear bomb was dropped, that's Japan. But what did Japan do? Other than relief packages or so many things, they built up their economy, massive infrastructure. That's exactly how China has become a superpower. That's the path, that's the trajectory which South Korea took. Their per capita income is great, even much better than India today. I mean, South Korea is knocking on the doors. They want to become the G7 nation. Obviously, it'll be G8. I know Russia was the 8th country before we knocked them out. But then a massive infrastructure needs to be built, which will help us economically. That will also help us in creating the jobs. Other than the infrastructure, I think the major thing that we need to do, we need to become a major player in the tech sector. Then the third part, because tech sector is all about innovation, creating jobs, attracting investment, creating high-paying quality jobs, then I think we need to spend proportionately on our defense budget as well. That will make us good, if not a very powerful, a good, decent military power. We definitely need to do that. And then also we need to invest in programs for youth. When I'm saying programs or infrastructure for youth, that includes big stadiums. You know, I was watching Copa America Soccer Cup. Amazing stadiums in US, from LA to New York to any cities, Chicago. Oh my God, the soccer matches, as much as it was a treat to watch the soccer matches in US, the stadiums are beautiful. And you know, side by side, they held this Copa America soccer tournament, and they were also doing the Cricket World Cup. Can we do that? There are just 2 cities being selected for the Soccer World Cup in 2026. So we should be encouraging our youth. So there are so many things, I think, that we can invest in: innovation, infrastructure, defense, tech sector, healthcare, education. Why can't we build world-class universities? Does America have a monopoly on that? We should be building world-class universities. I've done some sort of research on that and made a complete, editor's take program. So we'll deliver that very shortly. What does it take to build world-class universities? Anyways, what's your take on this?
Yeah, absolutely. There's the short-term solution, which is the aid, of course, that's immediate, and then there's the long-term solution in terms of some of those key things that you're talking about, and how we can be more competitive in terms of what the world needs. We definitely have, a good workforce, and we have the key natural resources, and like all of that we have in-house. It's just, can we get around the extra talk when it comes to different political parties and them getting at each other? I find that, majority of the news you listen to, it's really, we're just running circles around ourselves, the kind of debates, the quality of, the stuff that we're worried about. It's really has to come to either we have, leaders that step up and are able to get some sort of a majority mandate and have a vision that they could push this through. And so far, I know that we talked about the Liberals. I mean, when Prime Minister Justin Trudeau took office back in 2015, the Harper government had left him $2 billion surplus. And that's when he took over. And those were good times, 2015. And people say, back then, they didn't have the same sort of issues. And now we're looking at, $60 billion that, is our debt. So
deficit.
Deficit, sorry, is our deficit. So that's a massive jump, being able to inherit a government where you had $2 billion surplus to 60 billion deficit now. And so it's for the next government, whichever party that's going to form that government, that's the challenge there. And now we're going to have to do the spending. Mind you, the what we'll collect in tariffs, hopefully that's going to help balance certain things out. But at the end of the day, I think as the Canadian consumer, as the Canadian citizen, we're already, dealing with that situation in terms of the unaffordability. So, I mean, I'm really going to now tune in to seeing what some of these leaders have to say. And we'll see now what President Trump is going to retaliate. I don't think President Trump is not going to say anything tomorrow. I think when Monday rolls around, we're going to hear from him, if not tomorrow, on his response back to Prime Minister Justin Trudeau.
Yeah, and I think we'll call it a wrap. It has been a big, busy day for us here at Channel Y Studios. I hope you enjoyed today's discussion. I thoroughly enjoyed it, as much as I may not like both the countries imposing tariffs on each other. But Ramonaji, thank you for being on the show. We will carry on the discussion. There were so many other issues that we were supposed to discuss today, so we will be discussing all those issues. Once again, I'd like to thank you. You're doing an amazing job at Ymedia Newsroom. You're leading that show. Thank you so much for that. Anything you want to say, the shows that you're doing, please?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Please tune in to Ymedia Newsroom. It's on at 4 p.m. When you tune in, you'll see what's happening throughout the day when it comes to the Ontario elections, when it comes to the what's happening in Canada with the tariffs, as well as the Liberal leadership that's going on right now that will determine the next Prime Minister until we go into a federal election. So anything Canadian-based, because of the urgency that we're in today with multiple elections and the unknown, that's definitely what you can find when you tune into Ymedia Newsroom.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your time. I hope you enjoyed today's discussion. That's all from Channel Y Studios. Stay tuned. We will keep you posted. There's lots of action. Regular